Good morning to you, Chris.
Yeah, hi, Julia.
I understand you were actually in Brixton on Saturday night and saw this march for yourself. I mean, when I saw the footage, I thought, first of all, oh, come on, this didn't happen in London, in the UK, it didn't this weekend. This must be some sort of fake news, and then realised it was absolutely genuine. I have to say, I can't see any good coming out of this march, put it that way.
Well, I was there. I missed the march, but I actually was there when they were sort of in a group after the march, and I walked amongst them. To be quite honest, at the time, I thought, what's going on here? And I was a bit puzzled by the Forever family. I didn't feel at all threatened by them. There was no menace towards me or anything like that. They were sort of chatting quite amicably. Some of the stab vests they were wearing weren't proper stab vests. They seemed to be made out of sort of various cardboard packaging, but some of them were. But obviously, it is going to raise some questions. I would imagine that the meetings at Scotland Yard this morning with the Commissioner and the top brass, that will be number one on their discussion.
Well, I should certainly hope so. I mean, the event was marking Afrikan Emancipation Day and the 186th anniversary of the abolition of Slavery Act. Again, by the way, the abolition, but their argument is that slave owners were compensated under the Act because slaves were seen as the property of the slave owners, and so millions was paid out in compensation to the slave owners, but slaves were not compensated for the injustice done to them. Look, I can understand, looking back now at what happened 186 years ago, that's appalling. I mean, it's disgusting. But again, very, very different times. It does seem bizarre, a demand for reparations now from young black people living in the UK who were not brought here as a result of slavery, came of their own goodwill. Most of these young people are all born in this country, as British as you and I are, demanding reparations for people in their past who were, picking cotton and treated appallingly, lucky, frankly, that they even made it across the Atlantic alive, considering the disgusting conditions they were kept in, worse than cattle, frankly, how these people were, their forefathers were treated. But none of the people on the streets yesterday were ever slaves. None of their parents, their grandparents, their great-grandparents, and none of the people watching and people like me discussing this were slave owners either. I'm not a slave owner. My family weren't slave owners. The vast majority of people in this country who were white, their families weren't slave owners. Something like 2% of the country benefited from being slave owners. I'm not quite sure why the argument for reparations should be coming up now.
No, that's right. I mean, I don't want to get too much into the politics of it. I'm more interested in the policing of it. I think one point, yes, there was a lot of talk of reparations. But one point I would like to make about Saturday, I went down to have a look because I write about these things. And yes, that sort of protest with them in uniform did stand out. But having said that, there was almost a complete absence of tension Saturday, between all those protesting and the police. There was quite a substantial police presence. And yet everyone seemed to get on quite well. I was expecting, after what we'd seen over previous weeks, there to be abuse hurled at police officers. There were quite a lot of black police officers on duty. And I expected them to get a lot of stick, which they have been getting.
Well, I mean, some of the...
But there was none of it.
Well, maybe because there was no aggro, because despite the extraordinary provocation, police officers stayed, I think admirably calm, but I don't know how they do it, and I don't know why they're expected to do it. Seen some videos, and again, I was able to verify there were videos from Saturday, because again, it's very important you check these things and don't jump to conclusions, and read quite lengthy videos of women objecting to one man being questioned by the police and possibly arrested, and just abusing, shouting, racist, shouting terrorists, shouting fascists in the face of police officers, right in their faces. I'm sorry, but since when did that become acceptable? Because if I went up to a police officer and spoke to a police officer like that, I would expect to be arrested.
Yeah, I mean, I saw that the lady is quite well known in terms of social media.
She's no lady.
No, that point was made. And she was filmed a couple of weeks ago at some sort of debate threatening a black guy, strangely enough, asking him to come outside so she could give him a good hiding. But that was, let me stress to you, that was isolated. Generally speaking, the relations between the police and all those there were surprisingly good.
But wait a minute, but isn't that the same as the relations were really, really good during the Black Lives Matter marches? Because we had police officers sitting on getting down on their knees.
Yeah,
instead of policing and people who were actually breaking the law and putting other people at risk through the lockdown.
But there was nothing sort of going on Saturday. There was a bit of traffic obstruction that was clear quite quickly that you will get in any sort of event where you've got a float going round the music. That there really was an absence of hostility. That's not to say that in the future there's not going to be problems. This Saturday coming, there's a protest outside Tottenham Police Station. And of course, we're coming to the anniversary of Mark Duggan. Now, that's going to be interesting to see how that goes, whether this group, Forever Family, turns up, whether we get a march, a sort of a malicious type march. So there's another challenge for the police on Saturday. But I think the point to make really is that all this animosity that people talk about between the black community and the police, and the black community hate the police, there was almost, apart from the isolating, a complete absence of that on Saturday, which is good, which is positive. But certainly the Public Order Act, Julia, I'm sure you read about, there is... from 1936, after Mosley's marches, there is a law basically saying that you cannot march in uniform for political purposes.
Yeah. I mean, we've seen Britain First were prosecuted for this just a few years ago, and quite rightly. Right. I have to say, I just don't want to see this on my streets. I'm sorry, I really don't. Chris Hobbs, thank you very much. Good to have your perspective on all that. Chris Hobbs, former Metropolitan Police officer.